So we had some more information come out around the situation with the CMA and Xbox, Activision, Blizzard, that whole mess over there. But we did get some info when it comes to Game Pass and sort of a conclusion that's been drawn now by the CMA, and that has to do with Microsoft confirming that Game Pass actually hurts sales of games on their platform. But we'll go over all of this here today and exactly where this is coming from. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the SpawnWave Plus channel. This is something that's been discussed at length. What will happen in the future as more and more people get used to the idea of Game Pass just essentially allowing you to download titles day one as opposed to buying them traditionally for the price of $60 or $70? Will Microsoft condition Xbox users to just kind of wait for it to go to Game Pass and sort of skip out on the sale of, say, a third-party title even? Well, if we take a look over here, this was posted up by gamesindustry.biz, and I did discuss this very briefly in Newswave one day, but there is a very lengthy set of documents. There's a lot of information there. People have been going through it, and we've seen some more info come out from this that even includes Activision Blizzard and some of their thoughts on Game Pass. But they say Microsoft confirms Game Pass cannibalizes sales. This over on gamesindustry.biz. Xbox maker tells UKCMA it expects titles to see a decline in base game sales for at least a year following inclusion into subscription service. Now, the way this works is the CMA, of course, alongside of Microsoft, has been working to build a case as to what Microsoft can do with concessions to get the deal to go through. And that's basically what's going on. There's a lot of back and forth. That's why you heard about Microsoft requesting documents from Sony even. Sounds like that even pushed a bit far, and Sony kicked back and said that they were being harassed by Microsoft. But they're doing discovery, and part of that, Microsoft provided several documents to the CMA that were basically all redacted. And some of it we have an idea as to exactly the structure. One, for example, was an email chain, and it could have been people going back and forth with a third party, maybe for negotiations. Some of it had to do with just overall analysis and sales information, and we know Microsoft doesn't necessarily like having hard sales numbers out there. They barely discuss anything specific when it comes to console sales, game sales, and most recently even Game Pass subscriber numbers, which is what everything kind of built around here. But we can see that they say Microsoft also submitted that its internal analysis shows a redacted % decline in base game sales 12 months following their addition on Game Pass. Now, as pointed out by Games Industry, and I thought of this immediately when it came up, because I don't think it's hard for anyone to believe that a game goes into Game Pass, right? Especially day one. Like, let's say it just releases on the Game Pass. You could pick a first-party title like a Forza Horizon, I guess, or a Halo Infinite with the campaign. But then you also think of third-party games that go in day one. Like, you could think of, I'm sure, High on Life, that went in day one. You could think of Hi-Fi Rush. You could think of MLB The Show. But if a game is there and you're a subscriber to Game Pass, you're most likely going to download the title as opposed to go out and buy it, whether it's digitally or physically if it's available. Yeah, it makes sense to me. That's what I've been doing. I'm a Game Pass subscriber. If it pops up there, I just download it digitally. And then, you know what? Sometimes if it does pop up down the road on Amazon cheap or something, or I see it in a store and it's in like the bargain bin, I might grab it just for the collection. But more than likely, I'm going to just download it day one. Like Starfield, I'll just pick that up in Game Pass and see what we have here. But the thing that is being brought up is that Phil Spencer actually said the opposite, as pointed out here back in 2018. Now, that's before, I would say, Game Pass got to where it is now, as they've been, of course, working to build it up over the last 4+ years. Remember, it was around that time that Microsoft made the big push to add their first-party games day and date right there in the Game Pass. Before that, they had a selection of titles that they would put in there. Then they started making the push for third-party titles and all this. But he said when you put a game like Forza Horizon 4 on Game Pass, you instantly have more players of the game, which is actually leading to more sales of the game. You say, well, isn't everyone just going to subscribe for $10 and go play this thing? But no, gamers find things to play based on what everybody else is playing. So Basically, he's describing word of mouth, as in if a game is not well known and the money is right, because Microsoft is paying money, obviously, to get third-party titles into Game Pass, it actually might make sense. Like Tunic, for example, the developer there said, it was great. A lot of people decided to check the game out that maybe would not have otherwise. And when I move to make another game, they'll know this developer made Tunic, and maybe they'll check that one out, right? So you can use Game Pass as a means of advertising just to get the foot in the door, right? For a title that may go overlooked on a platform. But if you already have an established intellectual property and you're not Microsoft, who does have to hold up Game Pass with their own first-party games, as they have gone all out and said every first-party game that we release is going into Game Pass day one. If you're not part of that, then you're going to look at it sideways and go, maybe not. For example, here, they say in the CMA's report, it cites Microsoft as saying that Activision took a dim view on putting its titles into multi-game subscription services on any platform, believing that it severely cannibalizes buy-to-play sales, particularly in the case of newer releases. So, if you're Activision, there's really no reason to put Call of Duty into Game Pass unless you're owned by Microsoft, which is basically the path we're on now, and a lot of analysts and all this believe that the deal will still go through. To me, it's like, wow, this is going back and forth here. But that's what it would take to get Call of Duty into Game Pass day one, because otherwise we see how it sells. It's an established intellectual property and a very expensive game to make. Microsoft would have to pay some ridiculous amount of money for it to even be worth it for Activision. In that case, it might not be worth it to Microsoft. Take-Two has gone on record saying something very similar, in that it doesn't make sense for them to take something like Grand Theft Auto 6, whenever that does get revealed and released, and put it into Game Pass. No amount of money that Microsoft would be able to offer them would make sense. I mean, we see the sales of Grand Theft Auto 5 when GTA 6 gets announced and we get a release date and a showcase for it. Let's be real, the internet's just going to break. It's going to be a massive, massive media blitz for that title. And they'd rather sell it for $70 a piece and then probably sell it again 5 years later or 6 years later on the next generation platform, and then again later on. We know how that works with Rockstar. So leaving it in Game Pass for them doesn't make a lot of sense. And the thing with Game Pass, as much as some people will say it's a proven concept that's going to work, we're not necessarily there yet. One, we don't really have a wealth of big first-party games from Microsoft releasing into the service, because they've gone like a year and a half before they have their next big title out, and that being Redfall. So to me, the jury's still out on Game Pass formula, and if it can work for everyone across the board, like Nintendo or Sony. I think Microsoft has a lot to prove, and they have to get that number, I think, north of 100 million before they can really even start discussing the possibility of this just being an industry-wide thing, especially when you see the sales that Sony can put up with something like God of War, or the sales Nintendo puts up with just about all of their first-party games, right? You can go look at their investor relations page, and it's just like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million sold. So interesting stuff here, though, with the CMA report showing that Microsoft, even internally, has data showcasing that Game Pass does kind of have a negative effect on game sales, as they say, in the first year following its release. But I'm curious what people think out there, if they believe that Game Pass is a detriment when it comes to game sales, like specifically it seems in Microsoft's case on the Xbox, and is there a future where gamers on Xbox, maybe even kind of on PC using the Game Pass there, would be conditioned to just outright wait for third-party titles? And maybe that's why some third-party developers are showing it, where they're like, we're going to skip it for now. Square Enix comes to mind, but even Capcom with the Mega Man Battle Network collection, that had me scratching my head. But you hear kind of some of the data here and some of the points being shown in court with regulators. It's like, ooh, what's going on over there? But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.